Okay, hi everybody. This is Mr. Sweeney. Welcome to my first online class. I thought that we would get started with a quick reteach on the Compromise of 1850. We're getting into the lead up to the Civil War, and it really starts off with the Compromise of 1850. We did technically talk about this beforehand, but that was almost a month ago, so I figured we could use a reteach. The objective is that you will be able to explain the causes, the effects of the Compromise of 1850, as well as the terms. That means that the specific parts that are inside the Compromise of 1850. Now, one of the things that I'm trying to do, and especially with me not being in here to ask questions or answer questions, I want to make certain that we are clear. So there are two basic teams. There's the pro-slavery team and the anti-slavery team. And whenever I talk about the pro-slavery team, whether I'm talking about southern slave states or a plantation or something that is associated with the slave states and pro-slavery, I'm going to color that light. I'm going to highlight that light gray so that you will be able to identify that as, okay, that's pro-slavery. Whereas everything else, whether it's a free state, abolitionism, which means the anti-slavery movement, the Underground Railroad, all of these are anti-slavery, and so those are going to be highlighted in blue. Also, moving on, every now and then I'm going to introduce a new key concept or draw attention to some sort of visual. And whenever I do that, I will highlight that in yellow, right there, as well as to color it yellow on whatever the visual display is. So the star over here, that's your new key concept. I think you guys get it. So, quick refresher. In 1803, Thomas Jefferson bought the Louisiana Purchase, which added a bunch of new territory to the U.S. In 1820, the question came up, should slavery expand into this new territory? One more time, that's this area right over here, the Louisiana Purchase. So, in 1820, Henry Clay, also known as the Great Compromiser, organized a compromise, which means a deal. That's one of those words that we're going to talk about over and over and over again. A compromise is a deal. It's called the Missouri Compromise because it had to do with the state of Missouri over here. It basically said that after the state of Missouri, there would not be any more slave states north of the 3630 line, which is this yellow line right over here. So as you can see, this was a pretty good deal for the free states. This was a good deal for the anti-slavery people because we now have 1, 2, 3 more slave states, along with another 10 or 12 free states. Pretty good deal for the free states. However, this happens again in 1848. America won the U.S.-Mexican War, and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo gave the U.S. a new group of territory called the Mexican Cession. That's this yellow area right over here. And theoretically, anything that is south of this 3630 line here should be a slave state, right? That's what the Missouri Compromise says. Except a new issue comes up in 1850 because California, right over here, wants to enter the Union as a free state. And that really made this, that was one thing that really made the South very nervous. The slave states were getting very, very nervous because they wanted to protect slavery. And several things were going on. Abolitionism, the anti-slavery movement, was gaining more power. Additionally, the Underground Railroad was helping many slaves to escape from slavery. And then if California became a free state, that means that the free states would have an advantage in Congress. And before we move on, I just want to emphasize the Underground Railroad, those are code words. It was not a literal train in a tunnel. This is more accurate to what the Underground Railroad looked like. A bunch of people who were trying to escape slavery, so they were sneaking around at night, carrying supplies with them, usually just a handful of people at a time. So, to make the southern states happy, Henry Clay of Kentucky and John C. Calhoun of South Carolina, yes I know, they ugly, made a compromise. They made a deal. California would become a free state, so that means that there are more free states than there are slave states. So theoretically, that makes the free states happy. But to make the southern slave states happy, the Fugitive Slave Act was passed. One more time, an act means a law. So this is a law that says escaped slaves can be captured and returned to slavery. It also said that they would use popular sovereignty, which means that the people, the voters in these states, decide on whether or not the new Utah or New Mexico territories would become slave states. Now, mostly, the Compromise of 1850 really helped the South. The South was very happy about it. The slave states were very happy about it, and the northern free states were not. And the main thing that caused all of these problems was the Fugitive Slave Act. Because, one more time, this was the law that really emphasized to the whole country, we are basically two separate countries. We are slave country and anti-slave country. So the Fugitive Slave Act, it happened because the Underground Railroad, one more time, not an actual train, underground, these were code words. What they would do is all of these abolitionists would help the slaves escape into the northern states and to freedom. So obviously these southern states hate this. So they want a law that basically takes away the Underground Railroad. So all of these slaves are escaping from the south into the north. Well, that doesn't mean anything. Because even if a slave escapes from the south into the north, slave catchers could still find that former slave, take them away, arrest them, and take them back to slavery. Northern abolitionists hated this law because it felt like this means it doesn't matter if this is a free state because this escaped slave can be taken back to slavery. So this infuriated Northern abolitionists. And the southern states loved it because that meant that even if slaves escape from slavery, they can be captured and they can be dragged back. So that's basically what you need to know about the Compromise of 1850. So at this point, let's go ahead and take a look at our exit ticket. What was one effect of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850? A. The Republican Party lost influence in the federal legislature. B. The Missouri Compromise was deemed unconstitutional by federal courts. C. Tensions among the populations of northern and southern states increased. Or D. Immigrants were forced to relocate from eastern cities to western territories. So a quick refresher. Your key concept here is the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. That means that the slaves that had escaped from slavery could be arrested and dragged back into slavery in the South. So southern states loved it because that meant that slaves could be returned to slavery. Northern states hated it because that meant that even though they were free states, they still couldn't protect slaves. So the correct answer here is C. Tensions among populations of northern and southern states increased. Next question. The Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1850, and the Kansas-Nebraska Act. What was the fundamental question addressed in each of these congressional acts? Now, we never talked about the Kansas-Nebraska Act, but we did talk about the Missouri Compromise and the Compromise of 1850 today. So what was the fundamental question addressed in each of these congressional acts? Should the U.S. expand westward? Should states be allowed to nullify federal laws? Should slave labor be allowed in new states? Or should states be able to secede or leave the Union? So one of the things in this question is that it is trying to trick you because the Missouri Compromise, the Compromise of 1850, both of these came up after the U.S. expanded westward. After the Louisiana Purchase, the U.S. expanded westward. After the U.S.-Mexican War and the Mexican Cession, the U.S. expanded westward. So westward expansion is a part of these two issues. But the question was not, should we expand westward? Both of these happened after the U.S. had already expanded westward. The question here is, should slave labor be allowed in new states? Missouri Compromise said no slave states north of the 36-3 line, and the Compromise of 1850 said escaped slaves can be recaptured, taken back to slavery, California can be a free state, etc. Well, there we go, guys. We've just wrapped up our first online lesson. Hopefully that we will figure out some more interesting ways to do this, but for now, well done. We'll take it from here.